Tune into MeTV.
For 3 hours.
It's talking, say, well, tell me more about that, or add something else that may refer to something they've said previously to keep them the focus of the conversation is one of the key components of quality time.
Do you think quality time changes as your relationship goes on? Because at first I've noticed, like on dates and stuff, you never take your phone out. Like you are all ears, listening, focusing, but then as time goes on, you get more comfortable. Do you think that changes it too with how you give? That's a great point, because I think the longer we're with somebody, the more we're going to know what they're going to say. That we have to kind of push over, because you still, that quality time person still needs to be heard. And so even if you've heard it before, do your best to stay focused and try to think of maybe another open-ended question you could ask that you haven't done before, or reflect back on, well, the last time we talked about this, you mentioned this person, what's gone on with that? So you can extend those conversations kind of like a tree has different branches, but just trying to keep track of that. But it's tough after 3, 4, 5 years, maybe some couples after 25 years, they can probably complete each other's sentences. Right, exactly. It's like, what is there to talk about? I mean, maybe you have kids, and then obviously there's a lot to talk about because they're very noisy, but it definitely changes things. And then especially when the kids leave and then you're empty nesters, your world kind of flips around again. Bingo. Yeah, it's interesting. So what are some examples of quality time? Yeah, so we're going to be looking at setting time aside and making sure that you have that time together. And that can happen cooking together, maybe a new restaurant, going for a walk together, tickets for a movie. All these things are great ways to say, you're important to me, and what we're going to do together, just the two of us, is important. If you have trouble with that, scheduling something more regular is going to be something to do too, so put that on the calendar. How important is it to make like a weekly date night for whether you're married 6 months or you're just starting to see each other or you've been married for 25 years? Why is it so important to set at least one day a week for yourself? Yeah, so the marriage training information talks about 15 hours of time together, so 3 hours of that can be quality time between a couple. And the busier you get, the more you have to set time aside to talk about maybe some personal things, but also just to have fun together too. So it's a 5-to-1 ratio, and you got to make sure you're getting 3 hours a week in. So a weekly date would probably get pretty close to that standard that we're learning now in our field. So what are some things to avoid then for this one? Yeah, so if you don't like going out, if you're more introverted and you're in situations where maybe you're going to have distractions, or you don't enjoy maybe long stints of being in that one-on-one scenario, you're going to have to make sure that you try your best to do that. So also, if you're going to view that partner as a needy person, that they have to have all this conversation that's going to come off disingenuous, like we've been talking about with this, and then complaining about spending time. So if that really isn't your thing, you're going to probably have to push hard to find a way, different topics of communication, different activities to do, still one-on-one, but try to spice it up a little bit so you don't, if you don't have the love language of quality time, you can still meet that need of your significant other. I feel like the viewing the other person as needy could honestly happen in any of the 5 love languages, because if it's not a way that you show love or give, but quality time is a little different because it's actually setting aside that time and having to be with them. Like for words of affirmation, you could send a quick text, you could write a note, quick things like that, picking up a gift for gift giving, acts of service, picking up the dry cleaning. Like some of them are a lot less time consuming, but quality time, I feel like you're really putting in the time then. Yeah, with that person. And those are great examples of how the other ones you could probably do a little bit more independently. But so that's something you have to kind of be maybe a little more intentional about on your schedule and your mindset going into time with the quality person. And it can be really hard not to feel that they're needy when you have to set aside that time, but that's a great point. Yeah, I don't know. But we are wrapping up the week, so I just kind of want to talk before we have to go now. We've learned about all 5 of them throughout the week, and just what's that kind of last piece of advice you have for us to kind of put this into play and actually work toward this now? Okay, so your assessment will give you a top 1 or 2, but the thing to remember is use all 5 and keep those other ones, even though maybe your score was lower on those, in the game. And that can be another way to spice things up. And like we talked about in one of the other segments, maybe something will shift and that person's love language does move to take care of that child or the parent, and flow with that and be adaptive. And do you think this attributes to success in marriages and friendships and family as well? Yeah, because it hits the energy button. Yep, and if I have that love language need met, then I feel more connected to that person. Otherwise, you can do everything you want, but they won't feel the actual love they need. So, good stuff. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in and doing this week with us and giving us some great advice. Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, we are all done learning about the 5 love languages, but still, if you haven't taken the quiz, make sure you do so and communicate this with your significant other. We'll be right back.
This is your KELO News update. A dramatic move is finally happening on the eastern edge of Sioux Falls. Today, crews are moving the Pillsbury house across an empty field. They've been planning to do it for weeks, but the weather kept getting in the way. The house will eventually find a home in Baltic. We are following along on the first leg of the long move. Watch for updates on KELOLAND.com and tonight on KELOLAND News. That's a look at today's headlines. Join us at 5.
Everything.
But you're stepping up. You're saving lives here. Lives of your loved ones, your neighbors, your fellow Americans. You're showing how this town, this state, this country takes care of our own. Leave nobody behind. We can do anything when we do it together. I believe we're on the road. I promise you. I know we'll run into bumps. It's not going to be easy here to the end. But we're going to beat this. We're going to beat this. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Howard, thank you and your people for all you do. Thank you.
Doses in December and have amped it up in a remarkable way. And we're going to have, he said...
Kalamazoo, Michigan. Let's go back. He seems to be taking questions.
Well, I got to do it.
What does it?
Interactive gallery of maps to follow the case.
Going to be a continuous rolling effort. So we will have ordered, much of which will have been distributed, over 600 million doses by the end of July. July 29th is the expected date. That could change. Look what's happening with the weather now, for example. It's slowing up the distribution right now. But I believe we'll be approaching normalcy by the end of this year. And God willing, this Christmas will be different than last. But I can't make that commitment to you. There are other strains of the virus. We don't know what could happen in terms of production rates. Things can change. But we're doing everything the science has indicated we should do. About whether or not, for example, I can't set nationally who gets in line when and first. That's a decision the states make. I can recommend, I can say what I've said, like I'm the guy that said we should lower to 65 years of age. I think 35 states have done that or more. I think that, for example, I think it's critically important to get our kids back to school. I think it's really important because of the psychological damage being done and the loss of time. A kid loses a semester when they're in 5th grade. It means they're not just up a semester behind, they may be a year and a half behind. All the difficulty. You were at that town meeting I had where that little girl was worried that, her mommy told her mommy she worried maybe she's going to die. Where that little girl was worried that, her mommy told her mommy she worried maybe she's going to die. So there's a lot. I think it's important we get people back in school. There's a difference, for example, according to the science now, between kids between the ages of 3 and probably 12 years old in terms of whether they can absorb and or communicate the disease than it is for kids who are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old who congregate more together. It's harder in a high school than it is in a grammar school. We know certain things are necessary. Social distancing, smaller class sizes, ventilation, testing, and the possibility that staff, whether it's the staff taking care of the sanitary conditions in the school, or simply, you've heard me say this before, bus drivers. To open the schools, we need more buses and bus drivers. We can't put kids packed in a bus sitting next to one another. So we know the things that have to be done. The question is the order in which we do them is going to determine on what moves the quickest and where the need is the greatest. Obviously, we still have to focus on first responders, our doctors, our nurses, those delivering the services. But the reason I bother to bore you with that detail is to try to explain to the American people that this is a process, but we know now the fundamental basic elements. The fundamental basic elements are that before you get the shot and after, if you get the shots, and after, social saves lives. Making sure that you wash your hands with hot water saves lives. This is not hyperbole. This is not a political statement. It's a reality. The science has demonstrated that. We also know that it's one thing to have a vaccine available. The problem was how you get into people's arms. There's not enough people to vaccinate. All the great hospitals in this state, and in my state, they can line up and give people, but they can't possibly handle the volume that is needed. So what do? You get more people qualified to give vaccinations. The quicker you can open up places and the people can come up and demonstrate they're on the pecking order, they're ready for their shot and they're qualified. Keeping places open 24/7 makes a lot of sense, but you need people to do it. So we all know the basic things that have to happen. Now, we also know that there are things that intervene. Things happen. Weather. People get ill. People get confused. There's a lot of people who aren't able. You know, you've heard me say before, you know, my little granddaughter can use that cell phone of hers to do more in about 12 seconds than I can do it in an hour. But a lot of people aren't able to. A lot of people who need the help, they say, well, get online. Well, they don't have a means to get online. They might not have, you know, the ability to get online. And they may not know how to do it. Talk about everybody is, you know, most people are within 5 miles of a pharmacy. Well, if you're living alone and you're a 68-year-old woman and you're in a minority neighborhood and there's no bus service, you might as well be 500 miles away. That's why we're leaning out, and Gary, you talked to me about it, getting mobile vans to go out. So we know the kinds of things that have to be done. But there has never, ever, ever been a logistical challenge as consequential what we're trying to do. But thank you very much.
All right, wanted to go back there and make sure that we got that Q&A from President Biden at Pfizer at the plant in Michigan today. He said even before and after you get the shot that you should social distance and wear masks. He said weather and illness and confusion can lead to some people not being able to get the shot or not knowing where to go for the shot. He said they're trying to clarify that. Didn't give any credit to Operation Warp Speed here this afternoon, although he said that it was a miracle of science that Pfizer got that vaccine ready to go in about a year, under a year, actually. But he said that the prior administration did not leave them enough in terms of distribution. He said we fixed the problem. So, you know, a bit of back and forth there on who's to blame for some of the slowness in the rollout now. So, all right, we want to get one more topic in with you this afternoon. The president also addressed Iran today after taking steps to re-enter the nuclear deal when the White House remains largely silent on Monday's missile attack against a U.S.-led military base in northern Iraq that killed a military contractor and wounded a U.S. service member. So let's bring in KT McFarland, former Deputy National Security.
Father, a partner, someone who has many dear friends, colleagues. It's inspiring to hear him talk about this. He gets it. He gets it. And I think for America, that's an important message right now, given all these issues. So that when he tells us that we're going to have those number of doses, I happen to, of course, have the benefit of some of the scientific information about that availability. I believe he will. And I think that the country on a whole has a real opportunity by summer to see a very, very different situation emerge than we've been living through. And I think the administration will come through with that.
One of the points that he made that stood out to me was saying that he didn't have the power to how to prioritize the vaccination rollout in all of this. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Should that be the authority of the president being able to set a federal approach to who and how vaccinations are distributed in this country, or is the right approach to leave it up to the states despite the variances that we're seeing from state to state?
You know, the late, great Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics are local. Well, all public health is local. It varies dramatically from neighborhood to neighborhood, from city to city, rural to urban, state by state. And so you really do have to let the states make the decisions about how best to share these vaccine doses amongst its various citizens. And I think at this point, the federal government surely has provided guidelines. They have given reasons why certain individuals should be prioritized, but in the end, it is going to be at the state and local level that these decisions are going to be made.
All right, Dr. Michael Osterholm, thank you very much for that. Mike Memley, really quickly, I just wanted to get your thoughts. This is the president putting the issue of the coronavirus. Oh, I apologize. I think we have lost Mike Memley. He'll be joining Nicole Walsh at the top of the hour. Let's switch gears from
To normal if there not an ability to get the vaccines to everyone. And so if the deadline is pushed back, or if that goal post is pushed back from the end of July to later in the year, then that means that the country is not going to return to normal maybe by the end of the year. And so that is certainly why the administration is moving very quickly to try to reach that goal of end of July for all vaccines being available to all Americans. But again, as you mentioned, Brooke, at the top, that doesn't necessarily mean every American is going to have a shot in their arm by the end of July. And so you also heard the president in his remarks stress why it's so urgent that in order to make sure that they meet those goals, is that this bill passes Congress. And he really pushed this challenge toward Republicans and also even some potential Democratic critics of the bill, saying, what would you have me cut? And listing off, and you really heard him be, I think, the most forceful that we've really seen him publicly in defending his bill as it moves through Congress.
We watch to see what happens with it in the House next week. Dr. McMurray-Heath, back over to you on my point about just the science of the Pfizer vaccine and the fact that the Pfizer CEO said that they may be able to be approved for storage in less cold temperatures. How much would that really help in just getting more shots in arms?
It would be tremendously helpful. Right now, the limitation of having to store the vaccines at -70 super cold temperatures means that you can't put it in a normal freezer. And so large hospital systems have these types of freezers. They can store and provide the vaccine. But if you want to get it into your local corner pharmacy, you need it to be able to be stable in a normal refrigerator or freezer. And that's why this was such a great breakthrough. And with the variants on the rise, and coming from different corners of the world, it's critical that we are going as quickly as possible to get vaccines in arms.
Here's hoping, as he said, that this next holiday season will be so much different from the one we all experienced this last year. Dr. Michelle McMurray-Heath and Laura Barron-Lopez, ladies, thank you so much. And you're watching CNN. We'll be right back.
As Carla wondered,
20.
You've been taking it for 20.
Well, I have. I found it and loved it. Oh, I noticed right off the bat, just in the very beginning, that I didn't get sick as often.
And he introduced me to it. So in 2009, about a year after we got married, I had some health challenges that required several months of weekly follow-up. It helped me rebound a lot faster because I was getting the things that my body needed that I couldn't eat on a daily basis.
Well, recently, the State Department this week approved a $197 million sale of missiles to the Sisi government in Egypt, despite human rights abuses in that country. Can the U.S. truly promote democratic, free principles, these values that you talk about, when we are still engaged with autocratic regimes?
Well, Eamon, I think the broadest point here is that we are the most powerful country in the world. It is not only the power of our example, as the President of the United States likes to say, it is the example of our power. We can do multiple things at once. To put it colloquially, we can walk and chew gum. When it comes to China, and you mentioned this, there are elements of the relationship with China that are adversarial. There are a broad set of elements that are competitive, and there are some areas of cooperation, of course. China's abysmal human rights record, the genocide that has taken place in Xinjiang, the crackdown on democracy activists in places like Hong Kong, these are issues that we will continue to speak out about. And just as importantly, these are issues that we will work with our like-minded allies and partners, including in the Indo-Pacific, to stand up and to push back on what China is trying to do. We can do the very same thing in Egypt. In Egypt, we have been very vocal about the need to protect the human rights of all citizens. But at the same time, we realize that we have interests. We can balance our values and our interests at the same time. The transfer that you mentioned, these were defensive weapons. It was relatively small. It was a replenishment. So I wouldn't let that overshadow what we are trying to do around the world. And what we are trying to do around the world is to really put a polish on that example, on that power of America.
2.5 minutes.
Done, then people will notice that. And I think those numbers could be even better once people start to feel the benefits of that governance. You know, there are debates that are being had right now over the minimum wage, over student debt relief. I think that expands the conversation, so you're not just talking about, can government deal with the crisis of the moment, but rather, can government deliver a seismic shift and change that can fundamentally change the American economy?
Elisa Menendez, thank you. Always nice to end the week with your insights. And I want to remind everyone, you can begin your weekend, you're welcome, with the same insights. Saturday, Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, Elisa Menendez, American Voices on MSNBC. We're going to fit in a break, but I have an important story I want you to stay with me for. 6 police officers suspended for their role in the riot, and new reporting on whether Black Lives Matter is making progress on one of the biggest issues of the day. We have it all for you coming up.
Between sudden snow.
So House Democrats have a choice. They can vote in favor of the new wage and then blame the Senate for ditching it. But is that enough? House Democrats can only absorb 5 defections and still pass the bill without GOP help. Voting no could imperil the Biden presidency. Brett?
Chad will follow it. Thank you.
There are many whose belief that the system is rigged against them has been reinforced. Others have noted that there are winners and there are losers in every trade in our financial markets.
House Financial Services Committee Chairwoman Maxine Waters there. So what should Congress do about recent market volatility? Pollster Frank Luntz has been running this by his focus group, joins us now. Good evening, Frank. I know you talked to people from around the country about this issue, and you had some interesting responses. First of all, should regulations come? Are they needed? Take a listen.
This kind of gambling is insane. And you don't want to have people investing in funds where it's built on nothing. It's built on vaporware, just like the subprime mortgages were.
People want to put more regulations in place to make things fair. Problem is once those regulations are in place, they'll just find another way around it.
What's your take?
On every issue, political, economic, social, we're divided. Half of Americans want more regulation because they want to be protected. Half of Americans want less regulation because they want the opportunity that's unlimited. And this is no different. What is different here is that over the last month or 6 weeks, the public did come to see that there's something wrong with the markets, that there's something that they don't feel like they can control. And that's driving this greater concern. And that's why those hearings were held yesterday.
Yeah, and
we're going to be bringing in even warmer air as we head toward the weekend. Tomorrow there could be a little fog in Sioux Falls in the morning. A high temp of 28 during the afternoon, 33 in Aberdeen, 44 in Pierce, 37 in Rapid City.
Thanks for joining us.
Crisis in the South, a dire emergency unfolding with a 5th night of freezing temperatures ahead. Long lines at water distribution centers as half of Texas is without clean running water. Frozen hydrants stop firefighters from saving this apartment complex in San Antonio. Thousands still without power as federal officials scramble to deliver generators and blankets. Winter weather delays 6 million doses of the coronavirus vaccine. But as President Biden visits a vaccine plant in Michigan, Pfizer says its shot can be stored in a normal freezer. Plus, 2 women caught dressed up as grannies.
You stole a vaccine.
Back on the world stage, the president declares America is back.
And we are not looking backward. We are looking forward together.
Sexual assault in the military. The nation's new Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin addresses growing concerns after a Marine's emotional TikTok goes viral.
That I dedicated my life to the military.
35 Capitol Police officers under investigation. The new details tonight about their alleged actions in the assault. Deadly police encounter. New video shows police shoot and kill a man they say was jaywalking. The royal split, and the announcement tonight from Buckingham Palace about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And Steve Hartman's on the road with one man's frozen field of dreams.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin tonight with breaking news. Millions of Americans in the South are heading into another night of freezing temperatures without clean water or enough to eat. At food banks and water distribution sites, lines now stretch as long as a mile. Tonight, President Biden says he'll sign a new emergency declaration for the state of Texas, where half of the state is still under a boil water notice. Millions more in Louisiana and Mississippi are facing the same crisis tonight. And things are so bad in San Antonio, Texas, firefighters there struggled to get water from the hydrants to fight off an enormous blaze. Thousands of homes have been destroyed by pipes which have burst, and families are now worried how they're going to pay for the big cleanup. The economic toll from the storms could reach as high as $50 billion. The human toll, well, it's already being felt. At least 44 people have been killed by this week's winter storms. Some of those people froze to death in their own homes when the power went out. And tonight, all that wicked weather has also delayed the shipment of 6 million doses of coronavirus vaccines, forcing appointments to be canceled at thousands of vaccination sites across the country. We've got a lot of new reporting for you on a very busy Friday night. Our team of correspondents is standing by. CBS's Janet Shamlian is going to lead off our coverage from Houston, where temperatures are expected to plummet again tonight. Good evening, Janet.
Nora, there's a critical surge across Texas for water tonight. Community groups are collecting it. They're bringing it to centers like this, and then they are shuttling it out to people who need it. How dire is it? Well, the county judge called it a man-made disaster that has cut lives short.
Andrew Rudnick has called at least 100 plumbers to repair his burst pipes. He always hears the same thing.
6 weeks.
The Houston dad and his wife Megan have a 6-month-old daughter, Reese, and they're desperate for help.
What's it like having a 6-month-old and no water in your house for days on end?
It's scary to have to ask a neighbor to use their outdoor hose to fill a pot so that you can boil water for your baby's bottles.
Yeah. They're also worried about mold growing and may have to tear down the walls themselves.
It's definitely overwhelming. We're just talking about where we're going to stay tonight.
The power is back, but half the state's population, more than 14 million, still don't have drinkable water.
This is a drive-through site in Houston for people who don't have water. There are hundreds of cars in line here right now. By the end of the day, they will have given out thousands of cases of water.
Water shortages impacting first responders, too. Firefighters in San Antonio battling low pressure and frozen hydrants.
It's just these hydrants were frozen and we couldn't get water. We have to go quite a distance to get water.
With many grocery shelves bare, food banks are seeing a spike in demand. In the Dallas area this weekend, they're preparing to give out 25,000 meal kits.
We definitely anticipate there's going to be a surge in the need for emergency food.
Beyond Texas, taps are dry in parts of Louisiana and Mississippi as crews race to thaw frozen water mains. The storm stopped millions in their tracks.
Oh my God.
Good. But not Jenny Passman's baby. She had to give birth in her living room. No power or running water, but a new baby boy.
6 on the dot. Clyde Passman. You did it.
I know, but The best kind of delivery. Here in Houston, as volunteers are working around the clock, officials are saying it could be next week before that boil water order is ignored. That is a long time to wait.
A long time. Can't imagine delivering a baby in the living room. Janet Chamlian, thank you. And now to the COVID pandemic. This week's cross-country storms delayed the delivery of millions of vaccine doses, but it comes with promising news about Pfizer's shot. The company says it will expand production and possibly distribution. Here's CBS's Adriana Diaz.
Tonight, it's a game of catch-up. Delivery trucks are trying to weather this winter, but vaccine delays are widespread.
We have a backlog of about 6 million doses due to the weather. All 50 states have been impacted.
That represents 3 days of delayed shipping due to delivery workers snowed in at home, road closures, and more than 2,000 vaccine sites without power. The result, nearly all of this week's shipments to New York State are delayed. In Boston, dentist Cara Gresham's second dose appointment today was canceled despite her high-risk work.
Good morning. Everything's up in the air.
How do you feel?
A little bit frustrated, a little bit annoyed is probably a good word. Confused as to kind of what next steps to take.
In Los Angeles, more than 12,000 appointments today also canceled. Today, President Biden toured the Western Michigan Pfizer plant, shipping vaccines across the country.
I believe we'll be approaching normalcy by the end of this year.
Pfizer submitted new data to the FDA, showing its vaccines can be stored in standard pharmacy freezers instead of ultra-cold specialty freezers. That could expand distribution to more vaccine sites. In addition, an Israeli study finds that a single Pfizer vaccine dose is 85% effective, but the White House still strongly recommends 2 doses.
We're not going to be persuaded by one study that happens to grab headlines.
You know what you have done?
Meanwhile, people are going to great lengths to cut in line. In Florida, these women were given warnings this week after dressing up in bonnets and gloves, pretending to be senior citizens to get the vaccine.
You come back, anytime you're going to get arrested. Any question about that?
Today, and early estimates we have seen suggest that it could be one of the costliest disasters this state has ever seen, far surpassing Hurricane Harvey, which, David, as you know, was so devastating.
All right, Marcus Moore leading us off again tonight. Marcus, thank you for your reporting all week long and to the team on the ground there. I want to get right to senior meteorologist Rob Marciano because, Rob, Texas and much of the country waiting for some sort of a warm-up. We know it's coming, but another night of cold in Texas?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's coming, does it, David? The snow continues to fall here, but we have one more night of a hard freeze across the danger zone. Here it is on the map, well below freezing again in Houston and San Antonio, Austin, Dallas. Look at Shreveport, 18. Jackson, even without power as well, 20 degrees. But we do pop above the freezing mark tomorrow, and then Sunday, really, this warm-up goes in earnest into the 50s, 60s in Houston. That's going to feel good. And then the warmth really spreads across the Mid-South. Tennessee, you felt as well. You'll be in the 50s, up and over the freezing mark into the 40s here in the Northeast as well. So some of this snow, at least, David, will melt toward midweek.
Wow. And for Texas, the 50s and 60s, we can't wait to see that. Rob, thank you. Of course, the storm, as we've been reporting all week long here, slowing vaccinations. The White House COVID task force today saying this has impacted all 50 states, delaying about 6 million doses, and now the race to catch up. And President Biden today visiting a Pfizer manufacturing plant in Michigan where capacity will ramp up next week. Pfizer also saying they will soon be able to produce batches of vaccine, some of it in half the time, cutting time from 110 days to 60 days. That was encouraging. And after having to store their vaccine at 94 degrees below zero, their vaccine may now be stored in regular medical freezers. That's going to help as well. Here's ABC's Mary Bruce tonight.
President Biden today getting a first-hand look at Pfizer's assembly line outside Kalamazoo, Michigan.
There are 351,000 children just in this one town.
As Pfizer now says it will soon be able to produce batches of the vaccine in half the time, from 110 days down to 60. And Pfizer says the vaccine, which had to be stored at 94 degrees below zero, can now be stored in regular medical freezers once it arrives at vaccination sites. For Americans desperate to get back to some sense of normal, Biden is trying to offer optimism, but also a dose of reality.
I believe we'll be approaching normalcy by the end of this year. And God willing, this Christmas will be different than last. but I can't make that commitment to you.
The president still promising 600 million doses by the end of July, enough for all Americans. But he acknowledged not everyone will have received the shot by then, and he's urging Americans to get it.
If there's one message to cut through to everyone in this country, it's this: the vaccines are safe. Take the vaccine when it's your turn and available. That's how to beat this pandemic.
But the rollout has been slowed down by this week's storms. The backlog now roughly 6 million doses, impacting all 50 states. Authorities promising to catch up quickly.
We anticipate that all the backlog doses will be delivered within the next week, with most being delivered within the next several days.
The weather delays stretching across the country. In Los Angeles, cars turned away at Dodger Stadium, where they're already facing shortages.
This is the second time in less than 7 days, and no shot for my friend.
In North Carolina, 91-year-old Lily Pena, unable to get her second dose, is fed up.
I'm very frustrated. Even I'm angry.
We hear it. We hear it loud and clear. Mary Bruce back with us live from the White House. And Mary, Pfizer saying today they might soon be able to cut down production time for batches of vaccine, as we noted, from 110 days to 60 days. We liked how that sounded, though what that could mean for the ultimate timeline really remains to be seen, because the president is sticking with that promise. Enough vaccine for 300 million Americans by the end of July, he said again today. But he also said that he acknowledges that doesn't mean everyone's going to have the shot by then.
And David, which is why you heard the president doubling down on the vaccine safety, urging everyone to be vaccinated as soon as possible. The goal, of course, to reach herd immunity with 70 to 85% of all Americans vaccinated. The president then hoping we may get a sense of normalcy, possibly by the holidays. David.
Wow. I know people heard Christmas and they thought that's a long time, but he's trying to set expectations. We can all tell. Mary, thank you. The president also spent time on the world stage today. It looked more like a Zoom meeting with world leaders. His message and his words: America is back, and so are its alliances. The U.S. officially back in the Paris Peace Accord, and tonight how our allies are now reacting to all of this. And there was also that moment today that looked like the rest of us, quite frankly, in this pandemic, when the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had to tell Angela Merkel of Germany to mute her computer. Here's our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, tonight.
Today, in his first major speech on the world stage, President Biden declared an end to Donald Trump's America First, America Alone foreign policy.
I'm sending a clear message to the world. America is back. The transatlantic alliance is back. And we are not looking backward. We are looking forward together.
President Biden has already taken several concrete steps to erase Trump's foreign policy initiatives. He's rejoined the Paris Climate Accords and the World Health Organizations. He said he wants to restart nuclear talks with Iran. And today, Biden talked of working closely with allies Trump delighted in publicly criticizing and pushing aside.
Let me erase any lingering doubt. The United States will work closely with our European Union partners and the capitals across the continent.
Biden was addressing European allies remotely, a conference that had all the look of a large Zoom call.
Can everybody hear me? Wave if you can hear me.
It came with technical difficulties too. In a moment we can all relate to, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson reminded the German Chancellor to mute her line.
Can you hear us, Angela? That's okay, that's all right. I think you need to mute.
Later, Johnson, who had been friendly with Trump, enthusiastically welcomed Biden's abrupt change of course.
America is unreservedly back as the leader of the free world, and that is a fantastic thing.
That was really something. John Carr with us from Washington. And John, that was quite a welcome from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson there for President Biden. It got some attention because he was so close for so long to former President Trump.
David, there was no European leader closer to Trump than Johnson, not even close. Trump often boasted of their friendship. At one point, he even referred to Johnson as Britain Trump. And there you had Boris Johnson enthusiastically greeting Biden's efforts to undo Trump's policies. That was really something. One other change underscored in Biden's speech: he criticized Vladimir Putin and he called for a united front against Russia.
Our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, on a Friday night. John, thank you. There is also news tonight in the investigation into the riots at the Capitol. Tonight, at least 35 Capitol police officers are now under investigation. 6 have now been suspended. Here's ABC's Rachel Scott tonight.
Tonight, in the wake of the deadly Capitol siege, 35 Capitol police officers are under investigation, 6 suspended with pay. The department not only looking into the actions of the rioters that day, but the roles that some of their own officers may have played as the violence unfolded. It was images like these that sparked outrage. This rioter seen taking a selfie with an officer moments after storming the Capitol. And tonight, ABC News learning a growing number of those charged in the riot have now resorted to a new defense, blaming police for letting them enter. Like Christopher Grider, the man seen draped in a yellow flag. His attorney claims he just went through an open door. He allegedly was caught on camera trying to break into the House Speaker's lobby. And the Justice Department today announcing that 6 more people affiliated with the far-right Oath Keepers militia-style group seen here in this video have been charged with conspiracy. Videos that day also showed officers outnumbered and overwhelmed, fighting to protect the Capitol and the lawmakers inside. The Capitol Police Union releasing a statement, calling the investigation sickening. They claim the department is trying to divert the attention away from their significant leadership failures.
And David, we are told that the acting police chief has made it clear that any officer whose behavior is out of line with their rules of conduct will be disciplined. And next week, Congress will try to get to the bottom of what happened here on January 6th, holding public hearings looking into the security failures during the insurrection, David.
All right, we'll be looking for that next week. Rachel Scott live on the Hill tonight. Rachel, thank you. When we come back on this Friday night, the deadly plane crash colliding with a semi-truck, bystanders trying to save the pilot, and then the 2 young women accused of posing as grandmothers just to get vaccinated the moment they got caught, and how this played out.
With new rewards from Chase Freedom Unlimited, I'm now earning
for Monday, even into Tuesday as well. Let's take a look at that. So for Sioux Falls, the winds remain pretty light tomorrow and Sunday. A little bit breezy on Monday, about 10 to 20 miles per hour, and Tuesday, generally pretty light. Aberdeen, Northeast South Dakota, a very similar story. A little breezier Sunday into Monday, where we could see winds 10 to 20 miles per hour, could gust 25 to 35 miles per hour. But Central South Dakota, that's really when those winds are going to pick up into Sunday into Monday, where we could see wind gusts potentially 40, 45 miles per hour. So very windy in that part of South Dakota. So the hometown forecast tonight, staying above 0. So that's something good too, with a partly cloudy sky with clouds moving in overnight, some fog possible too. Tomorrow, 20s to the east, 30s, even some 40s over to the west.
Action Committee, CPAC, next week. Let's bring in 2 prominent Republicans, CNN senior commentator and former Ohio Governor John Kasich, and CNN political commentator, former U.S. Senator Jeff Flake. Jeff, is this what the Republican Party needs right now to hear from Donald Trump at CPAC?
No. No, I think it's the last thing the Republican Party needs. It may propel a few primary candidates forward, but it's not going to help Republicans win general elections, particularly in the states where, you know, the important elections are. So no, it's not what we need at all.
John Kasich, what do you think? Do you want to hear what the former president has to say?
Come on, Wolf, what do you ask me a question like that for? You know what the answer is. But you know, it's interesting. One of my friends pointed out, I don't know how we miss this at times, but with Trump as the president, with his rhetoric and his division, Republicans lost the United States House, they lost the United States Senate, and they lost the White House. Now that's 3 out of 3, you know. So they added some people to the court, you know, I recognize that, that's for sure. But when you keep losing these races, it means that your message isn't working. It's really a message of division. It's a negative populism that pits one group of people against another, blaming one group for the problems that somebody else has. That's why I did, for 5 years, I objected to Donald Trump. So no, we don't need to hear anymore. And I give a little credit to Mitch McConnell, and I think his direction has been 2 things. One is, I don't know him very well, Jeff does, but Mitch is from Kentucky, and he understands what's appropriate in terms of our country. It's sort of embedded in that. And secondly, I think he wants a group of candidates who are going to be, you know, going to be smart and positive and hopeful, and not people who are going to be extreme that can't win. So I think it's a twofer for McConnell, and he deserves some credit for this.
As you know, Jeff Flake, Senator Lindsey Graham is heading to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, to meet with Trump in an effort to try to ease tensions within the Republican Party. You know Lindsey Graham. You know him well. You served with him for years. Will he be successful in bridging this Trump-Mitch McConnell divide?
No, no, he won't. Donald Trump is going to do what he wants to do, and he's very upset at Mitch McConnell. That's okay, as long as he doesn't dominate elections going forward. Mitch was burned badly by what happened in Georgia, and all Republicans were. We lost 2 seats that we should have won, and lost them mostly because the president simply wouldn't accept his election loss and wouldn't get beyond it. So the notion that Donald Trump is going to help Republicans in the Senate regain the majority is just laughable. And Mitch McConnell knows that.
You know, John Kasich, as you know, Lindsey Graham is now the 3rd prominent Republican lawmaker to travel to Mar-a-Lago in the last 3 weeks. He likely won't be the last to make that trip to Palm Beach to meet with the former President Willie.
Helps my heart do its job better.
Martian surface with its front and rear cameras. One image showing the rover's wheels in the Martian dirt. Perseverance is able to capture images in color. That is a first for Mars missions. The rover is set to raise its mast tomorrow, which will enable other cameras to take panoramic shots. The rover landed on Thursday, and its main goal is to look for signs of ancient microscopic life on Mars. It has been a year since Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan stepped away as full-time working royals, and now Buckingham Palace confirms they will not be back. Keir Simmons reports from London.
Hey there, good day to you. This news will make headlines around the world. Comes at a tense time for the royal family, with the Duke of Edinburgh recovering in the hospital behind me here, and a statement from his wife, the Queen's office at Buckingham Palace, which says that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will not be returning as working members of the royal family. It goes on to say, following conversations with the Duke, the Queen has written confirming that in stepping away from the work of the royal family, it is not possible to continue with the responsibilities and duties that come with a life of public service. It goes on to say, while we are all saddened by their decision, the Duke and Duchess remain much loved members of the family. And then quickly after that, a statement from the Duke and Duchess's office. They, of course, in California, and the spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex saying, as evidenced by their work over the past year, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex remain committed to their duty and service to the UK and around the world. And it goes on to say rather poignantly, we can all live a life of service. Service is universal. Keir Simmons, NBC News, London.
We are ending our commitment to the nefariously cold temperatures for the foreseeable future. Austin Haskins has a final check of our forecast when we return.
We all need some magic after this past year. We'll be right back.
Tonight's On the Road segment is sponsored by Geico. You could say
you need to look at
which is serious and may lead to death. Work tie with her? Sounds good to me.
when you trade in.
That's a strong one. I've got about 30 seconds left. Your work is inspiring to people, including some of it with values and justice. I'm curious, what are the songs or artists that have politically inspired you, just as a final thought?
Oh man, Sally. I mean, yeah, I haven't heard you sing yet, but I love your work. My friend Valerie Kaur, who speaks so eloquently about revolutionary love, something I'm singing about a lot lately. I mean, there's just so many people that inspire me.
Love it. Well, it's great to bring you together. And someday,
my baby lesbian just died. My baby lesbian died. Just that's it.
It's full circle. Let me tell you something. Post-pandemic, Ani, we'd love to have you in person, and clearly Sally's going to be there no matter what, I could tell. So thanks to Ani and Sally. Thanks to everyone for being with us this week. The Readout with Joy Reid's up next.
My retirement plan with Voya keeps me moving forward.
Or atopic dermatitis.
Right around average or so, with temperatures and precipitation chances looking to be slightly drier than average, Sam. So overall, the next couple weeks look to be pretty nice.
Things looking pretty favorable. I think we'll take it also. We appreciate it. Lester Holt will join you next over on NBC Nightly News. The Dakota Sound continues in 2 minutes over on KSFY. Have a great night.
Dear Winter, my squad of 15...
Allegations of conspiracy against members of the far-right militia group the Oath Keepers have expanded, adding 6 new defendants with alleged ties to the group.
Prosecutors have identified several alleged members of the Oath Keepers seen here entering the Capitol in formation in tactical gear, including Sandra Parker. Prosecutors have said members of the group coordinated and planned before the January 6th attack, and even during it. They believe one of the group's leaders that day was Jessica Watkins. According to court documents, Watkins communicated on a walkie-talkie-like app during the riot. Quote, "We have a good group. We have about 30 to 40 of us. We are sticking together and sticking to the plan." Another voice says, "This is everything we effing trained for." Watkins has pleaded not guilty. Meanwhile, tonight, Dominic Pizzola, the man seen breaking a window at the Capitol with a police shield on January 6th, who the Justice Department says is associated with the far-right extremist group the Proud Boys, seems to be distancing himself from the group. His lawyer saying his association with the Proud Boys was minimal. The lawyer indicates Pizzola is about to plead guilty, but his case files also mention another witness who's cooperated with federal investigators to share details on the Proud Boys.
People are going to start to crack, and we are going to get more information. When things start to go down and people start to get charged, they all think about what's best for them.
Tonight, a source tells CNN Capitol Police have told lawmakers that ominous-looking razor wire fencing around the Capitol should remain in place at least until September due to lingering security concerns related to threats against members of Congress. Some in Congress have clearly been unhappy with the fencing, eager for a return to normal.
It's really discouraging to see the razor wire, the fencing, the image that it sends to the world.
Weeks after the Capitol insurrection, law enforcement and Homeland Security officials are not reporting any credible, specific threats. But they're still tracking online chatter about potential violence in Washington and against members of Congress.
We know that there is a clear and present danger that is facing these lawmakers. They have now become direct targets of anti-government and anti-establishment, militia-style extremists.
It's coming together. I love bringing this tradition to guests everywhere. Mom and Dad would be proud. Welcome to Delicious.
You thought you were the only ones who'd go...
Phil. A nice looking shot here of downtown Sioux Falls. Could this be the first night without negative temperatures in a couple of weeks? I think it just might be. Your forecast coming up in a few minutes. This is Dakota News Now.
This is Dakota News Now.
Good evening, I'm Kelsey Papp.
Qualified returning lessees can lease the 2021 Jeep Cherokee Latitude Luxe for $237 a month.
The first alert for striking and killing Joe Beaver on a highway just outside of Highmore last year.
However, each of those charges are misdemeanors and are not considered criminal. Prosecutors said one reason for that is the way...
Tonight on KELO News.
Good evening. Many people have questioned why South Dakota Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg is only facing misdemeanor charges after hitting and killing Joe Beaver with his car.
This isn't the first case where careless or negligent driving led to a traffic death and the driver responsible walked away with only a slap on the wrist.
We've been looking into the lack of laws in South Dakota available to prosecutors in deadly cases like these.
According to state law, if nobody sees you and you see a pedestrian and you're not drunk, you can run over them and get away with a misdemeanor charge.
While Joe Beaver's family members are frustrated with the lack of more serious charges against Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg, they are far from alone.
I just feel that there has to be something in between vehicular homicide and careless driving. There just has to be something else that fits.
Barb Olson's 19-year-old daughter, Caitlin Carmen, was killed on Highway 42 west of Sioux Falls after Mark Begeman rear-ended her car and pushed her into the path of an oncoming semi. Begeman received a $120 fine for careless driving.
Careless driving, you can get charged with that for sliding on ice and running into a fire hydrant. I don't think that's quite the same as taking somebody's life.
After her daughter's death, Olson wanted to change the law in South Dakota, but didn't succeed.
We need to join together and try to do something about this. I tried to do it on my own and just kept running into roadblocks.
Multiple attempts to change the law in South Dakota to allow for felony charges in cases like these failed in the legislature in 2006, 2014, 2016, and 2017.
Many states throughout this country have a negligent homicide law. South Dakota does not.
Negligent homicide is when there is no premeditated intent for another person to die, but rather when someone behaves in a way that he or she should have known is risky. Negligent homicide laws have been used to prosecute cases involving people who died in crashes in New Hampshire, Alaska, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Indiana, North Dakota, Texas, and New York, to name a few.
What I talk to most people about.
In order for prosecutors to charge Rounsberg with second-degree manslaughter, a serious felony, they would have to have been able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he wasn't just negligent, but rather he was reckless.
When you apply the law, as I just stated, to the facts of this case, this is what you end up with. There's no evidence indicating that Ravensburg's travel outside the lane of travel was done in such a manner to suggest a reckless disregard for the safety of others.
Olson's family could have pursued a case in civil court, but their attorney advised them it could take years and cause even more heartbreak, so they decided against it. Beaver's family has indicated they will file a case against Rounsberg in civil court. Another felony charge of vehicular homicide doesn't fit in this case because in South Dakota, you must be under the influence of drugs or alcohol when the death occurs. Prosecutors say Rounsberg was not. Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska all have vehicular homicide laws that can apply even if the driver is not under the influence. But even then, recklessness by the driver must be proven.
Well, while the Rounsberg case has received a lot of attention, including nationally, Joe Beaver wasn't the only pedestrian who was hit and killed in South Dakota in 2020. The Department of Public Safety says 11 pedestrians were killed in the state last year. From 2010 to 2020, 88 people have been struck by vehicles and died. If you would like to see how the state compares to others, you can find the full story on the Capitol News Bureau page on KELOLAND.com. And we're going to be checking in with KELOLAND's Bob Mercer in just a moment. But first, let's get a check on our weather. Warmer things.
And Morgan, with it warming up there, I understand there are some new concerns now.
Yeah, Lester, you're right. With the temperature rising above freezing now for the next several days, all those water lines and pipes that have been frozen solid could cause even more damage when they start to thaw. Lester?
All right, Morgan, thanks. I just spoke to the mayor of Austin, Steve Adler, who told me why they are still not through this. Mayor Adler, thank you for joining us. What do you folks need most right now as you head into the weekend?
We need water more than anything else. It is one plague after another. And one we're dealing with right now is it's the absence of water in the city. We need people that are volunteering and helping one another.
You've got pipes that have been frozen for days. Presumably they're starting to thaw, and that could bring its own problems. Is it possible this is going to get worse before it gets better?
We have about 2/3 of the city right now that doesn't have water. I don't think it's going to get much worse than that, but it's the question of duration. My community wants to know when this is going to be over. Many of them went almost a week without power, and now they don't have water. When the water comes back, we're having to boil it, but it's looking like at least several more days.
We're also still in the middle of winter. We don't know with climate change what comes next. We've heard a lot about the power grid in Texas, its vulnerability. But looking down the pike, just the next several weeks here, are you worried about a repeat?
This was such a rare event. I don't think we're going to see it again in the next several weeks. But I'll tell you, I'm not convinced it won't happen next year. This is the third time I've seen this happen. We're having more and more extreme weather events. We have to harden our system in this state. We have to change the regulatory structure to make sure that gets incentivized.
And what are you telling your residents tonight?
I'm telling them I'm sorry. I mean, people in this community are being asked to do things that they should never be asked to do, and enduring conditions they shouldn't have to endure. We need better answers from the state with respect to what happened with the grid. But right now, I need to get my folks water and food and warmth.
All right. Well, Mayor Adler, thank you for spending a few moments with us tonight. We wish you all the best of luck there.
Lester, thank you.
And if you would like to help those in need, you'll find the information on our NBC Nightly News Facebook page. Now, there's new fallout tonight from that trip to Mexico by Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Gabe Gutierrez has the latest on that.
Senator Ted Cruz now admits his whirlwind trip to Cancun during an intensifying weather crisis was a mistake.
I'd initially planned to stay through the weekend and to work remotely there, but as I was heading down there, I started to have second thoughts almost immediately because the crisis here in Texas.
But he got a frosty reception. The Houston Chronicle says Texans' anger with Cruz right now could power an entire electric grid.
He needs to show up and act like he cares. How could he go on vacation like this? This is ridiculous.
Cruz says his young daughters asked to go on the trip and that he was still in communication with state and local officials. But adding to the outcry, the New York Times reports a series of text messages from Cruz's wife Heidi to friends and neighbors shows the trip was hastily planned. Mrs. Cruz telling friends her house was freezing, proposing a vacation until Sunday, and inviting others to join the Cruzes at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun. The paper says the messages were confirmed by a second person on the text chain who declined to be identified.
When things are happening on the ship, we simply stay on the ship, and that's the commitment that we make when we sign up for these positions.
Cruz's office today did not respond to requests for comment about those reported texts. Lester?
All right, Gabe, thank you. This week's weather is still having a ripple effect on the COVID vaccine effort. Almost 42 million Americans have now received at least one dose. Hospitalizations now at just over 62,000. Miguel Almaguer with more tonight.
Tonight, as brutal weather finally begins to clear, its impact on the race to vaccinate Americans is coming into view. The White House says 6 million doses were delayed to all 50 states because of 3 days of shipping problems. This map shows the footprint of the storm, but its reach stretched coast to coast.
Keep on saying they don't have it. Or they don't have enough vaccination, or they don't have the appointments.
When more than 2,000 vaccination centers lost power, including hospitals and clinics, authorities scrambled to inoculate anyone they could. Lines forming at this Texas synagogue when word spread doses were about to expire. Outside of the storm, in Florida, authorities say more than 200,000 doses expected this week are delayed. 133,000 vaccines in Colorado are also behind schedule.
Still coping with serious distribution problems, even vaccination centers in California have shut down, but they could reopen tomorrow.
With 1.4 million doses in transit today, Pfizer is hoping to ease its complicated system of shipping and storage, seeking FDA approval to store its vaccine in regular freezers for up to 2 weeks, instead of those hard-to-find ultra-cold freezers. And now, roughly a year into the pandemic, there's been a 5-week decline in COVID cases as hospitalizations and deaths also slow. Jill Holker, a frontline nurse who needed a double lung transplant after becoming infected, is going home today after months in the hospital.
It's a long process that I had to go through, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Tonight, the war against COVID continues, but battles are being won. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
In just 60 seconds, vaccine cheaters caught in the act, how some are using deception to get the shots, plus the country vaccinating people faster than any other.
How do we ensure families facing...
And it really belies their underlying motives, and it also ropes in another one of their political canards, and that's that they somehow have to be protected from everyone on the right. They're doing magnetometers because Republicans are dangerous coming onto the floor, right? Just one insult after another.
I have to take, and I don't know why these
in
congressmen...
the American people and the wisdom of the American people, that they see through this. They understand what's going on, and in part because of how brazen they're being about it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ken, that I can't understand why Kevin McCarthy or any of these congressmen will stand for walking through those magnetometers. It is an insult, not just to them, but to the voters that put them in office. It's like saying they're all domestic terrorists and they need to be...
And that's an important connection.
Yeah.
That's a very important connection
Absolutely.
to make. And there are people fighting it. Congressman Clyde's fighting it.
Yeah.
Louis Gohmert is fighting it. There are others who would like to. The fines are so big that, but you can expect to see more on that. They're going to keep fighting that, and we're going to be very proud of them.
All right, thank you, Ken. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. Up next, the media's hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, why the media is roasting Ted Cruz for flying to Mexico after going easy on Gavin Newsom for flaunting his own COVID rules with a fancy French dinner. Will Kane joins me next.
In a recent clinical study, patients
today by his airport walk of shame. But as bad as Cruz is, and he is terrible, he's not the absolute worst, believe it or not. That reveal is coming up. And the great producer, director Lee Daniels is here. His new film, The United States versus Billie Holiday, about one of our greatest musical artists' persecution at the hands of the FBI, is getting major buzz. The readout continues after this.
Ain't nobody's business if I do.
I have moderate to severe.
Why is he leaving the party? Also, as the number of COVID deaths in the United States nears 500,000, President Biden says he is beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
I believe we'll be approaching normalcy by the end of this year.
Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? And NASA sharing incredible new images from Mars.
Police in the country as the White House announced 5 new federal vaccination centers, one in Philadelphia, 4 others across Florida, where they'll be able to deliver 12,000 shots a day. Meanwhile, the Biden administration today beginning to roll back one of former President Trump's signature immigration policies, starting to allow thousands of migrants applying for asylum to wait in the U.S. for their court hearings. Former President Trump had mandated they wait in Mexico, arguing it prevented a surge of migrants. But the Biden administration said that exposed asylum seekers to violence south of the border. Lester?
All right, Peter, thank you. President Biden also gave his first major speech to an international audience and drew a sharp contrast with former President Trump. Let's get more on this now from Andrea Mitchell.
Washington, D.C.
Tonight, a reset on the world stage. President Biden making good on a promise he made as just Joe Biden 2 years ago.
We will be back, and I'm a man of my word. America's back.
Reversing Donald Trump's decisions to quit the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords, and to pull U.S. troops out of Germany.
I know the past few years have strained and tested our transatlantic relationship, but the United States is determined to re-engage with Europe.
On Iran offering to join talks with Tehran to go back to the limits on nuclear fuel production, but also expand the deal to control Iran's missiles and other behavior.
We must also address Iran's destabilizing activities across the Middle East.
But it is a game of chicken. Iran is threatening to block UN weapons inspectors next week unless the U.S. first lifts the Trump economic sanctions. The U.S. says it won't lift sanctions until Iran stops violating the nuclear deal. An even tougher long-term challenge, climate change.
We're talking about security, energy security, economic security, food security, even physical security.
Iran has not yet responded to the U.S. offer to talk, but some leading Republicans are already opposing any talks with Iran and the U.S. making the first move. Lester?
Andrea Mitchell, thank you. No country is vaccinating its people faster than Israel, where almost half have received at least 1 dose. With more on that, here's Richard Engel.
They're getting creative in Israel to encourage people to be vaccinated. At a bar-turned-vaccination center, a free shot for every shot. Teenagers are now up. 90% of people over age 60 have already had at least 1 dose. Doctors say the impact is profound.
We can find some small amount of patients that are positive, but they are not sick. So the vaccine gives very, very good protection from severe disease.
It's proof vaccines, here it's mostly Pfizer, can end the pandemic. But per capita, the United States remains far behind. How many people had to get vaccinated by percentage?
And it's only at this point that we are beginning to see the effect. So the equivalent in the US
would be at the point where you vaccinated 150 million people.
Israel's population is small. Healthcare is centralized and mandatory, and the country's many wars have made it quick to respond to a crisis. All factors helping Israel lead the world in coming out of COVID lockdown. In Israel, fully vaccinated people will receive green passes, allowing them to go to gyms and attend cultural and sporting events. They're setting up special travel certificates as well. Lester?
Richard Engel tonight. Thanks. And be sure to join Richard for On Assignment, COVID Mutants. That's Sunday night at 10 Eastern on MSNBC. Up next for us tonight, could there be a lost generation because of this pandemic?
I am Robert Strickler. I've been involved in...
On today, of course, we were in the 20s for the first time.
When we'd all watched violence in the halls of our nation's capital and couldn't believe our eyes. For me, that day was the final straw.
Out front now, Arkansas State Senator Jim Hendren. Senator Hendren, thank you for being with me tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Poppy.
You know, I know this was a gut-wrenching decision for you. It can't be easy. You come from a family, a long line of Republicans. But you say you haven't changed. Did the party leave you?
I think so, Poppy. Again, the party that I joined way back when I finished high school and proudly cast a vote for Ronald Reagan and believed in the principles, and one of those principles was character counts and matters, but it was also the principles of conservative, limited government, a strong national defense, and so many things that I believe in. Those have all taken a back seat now to a personality. And again, as you saw there earlier, when I saw what happened after the election, I just can't be part of that anymore.
You know, it sounds like it was also not just what happened after the election. That may have been the final straw, but in your announcement, you laid out many of the things that former President Trump said years ago, some of them even during the 2016 election that upset you. Let's play that for our viewers.
I heard people demonized as rapists and murderers. I watched the former president actively fan the flame of racist rhetoric, make fun of those with disabilities, bully his enemies, and talk about women in ways that would never be tolerated in my home or business.
So you could have stayed in the party, like Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger has chosen to do, and tried to change it from the inside. Instead, you're leaving the party. I wonder if that means you think that the Republican Party should split. There should be a new center-right party.
That's going to be a decision that the party has to make for itself. I just decided for myself I could be more effective outside of the party. You know, here in Arkansas, we've had a long history of conservative Southern Democrats working with conservative, even moderate Republicans to get things done. And it's hard to do that. The state of politics has got so partisan now that there's a tremendous resistance to people working across the aisle. So I believe, for me at least, in order to build something that is possible for that kind of productive government to work, I needed to leave the Republican Party because of just the extreme partisanship.
For anyone who might not know, your uncle is the governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, was on the show last night, and he said he does not believe Trump should still be the center of the Republican Party. Listen to this.
I couldn't disagree more with what Senator Lindsey Graham has said. He has said that the GOP cannot win in 2022 without former President Trump. He has indicated that he defines our party. And certainly he has a huge following in our party, but he cannot define us for the future.
And even after the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, 75% of Republicans still say Trump should play a prominent role in the party. How does this hold that President Trump clearly has and continues to have impact your work? I mean, you're working, you say, to bridge divisions. You've started a new nonprofit called Common Ground. Can you do that when he has such a hold on the party?
Look, I believe there is a huge gap in the middle. There are so many people who do not have a political home right now, including my 4 adult children, which has been a big factor in my decision. They don't want to be part of the 75% that say we're going to follow Trump regardless of where he's going to take us. And they don't feel comfortable with far left-wing policies of the Democratic Party. And so I believe it's important to give those people a home. And that's what Common Ground Arkansas is going to be about. I just really, while there's a large number of Republicans that are still 100% dedicated to Trump, I'm going to let the Republican Party sort that out. But I believe there is an even larger number of people in Arkansas who are ready for a return to normalcy, a return to decency.
All right, well, we know you're thinking about running for governor of Arkansas. We don't know what you've decided or if you've decided, but you're thinking about it. And it's in a deep red state. I mean, a state that voted even more overwhelmingly for Trump in 2020 than it did in 2016. The chairwoman of the Republican Party of Arkansas responded to your decision to leave the party. Let me read you part of what she told the local newspaper. This is nothing more than an attempt to garner press for a future independent candidacy for governor. What's your response?
Well, that's part of politics that I say we are tired of. It is people just assuming motives without knowing what somebody's really trying to do. I've said what I'm trying to do, and it is sincere. I'm trying to build something that is for the people who don't have a political home. It's not about a governor's race. Like every senator probably thinks about being governor, just as a U.S. senator thinks about being president. I've not ruled that out, but this is about something far greater and far broader than one governor's race in Arkansas. If I wanted to be governor, I probably wouldn't be leaving the dominant party in Arkansas. Right. This is about building a home for people who don't have one now.
Right. It'll make it more of an uphill battle if you do decide to run.
That's right.
We appreciate you coming on
That's right.
tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Poppy.
All right, let's go to Gloria Borger, CNN Chief Political.
They've got to support their families, and their dreams of going to college right after high school will probably be impacted and shattered.
It seems like you really want to learn.
Yeah. I do want to learn. Like right now it's my last year, and I'm just trying to get my credits, get everything done.
But as Nayeli tries to graduate, her plans for a community college will have to be put on hold. They can't afford it. So for now, her dream is deferred. Gadi Schwartz, NBC News, El Cerrito, California.
Boy, those kids carrying a heavy load. We're getting a look at the first images from NASA's Perseverance Mars rover. One shows the rover in midair just before touchdown. Also, the rover's first high-resolution color image of the planet's surface. You can see that red tint and a close-up of one of the wheels in the Martian dirt. Up next here tonight, the big heart of Texas.
People everywhere living with type 2 diabetes.
You're right. We need to be on the ground and we need to be helping them. Just pushing back on you a little bit, Will.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Will. Coming up, Nancy Pelosi directing a, quote, bipartisan investigation into Capitol Hill security. But here's what her pick to lead the charge had to say days after the attack.
I think once this all get uncovered, there was some complicit actions at the Capitol Police.
Does this sound bipartisan to you? Miranda Devine responds next.
At VisionWorks, we want you to feel safe.
And statement 3 days later, after a local news report revealed a darker time in uniform. Graham reported she'd been raped by a fellow member of her unit in December 2019. The Army said it launched a criminal investigation, separated her from her alleged attacker, and offered and encouraged medical help. In Nicole's home, Nicole and Anthony Graham keep a photographic shrine, the happy daughter of a white mother and black veteran, the smiling soldier, the confident girl, confidence that they say the Army extinguished.
That same glow that she had about the military, that same happiness wasn't there.
And they say what the Army claimed to have done to protect her isn't true, beginning with when she first approached her commanders.
She got raped by a fellow soldier in December. She reported it in February. She was told to shut up. And the rapist was in her barracks, in her company, and she had to see him.
Asia Graham's own words also suggest the Army didn't do what it claimed. In a message obtained by PBS NewsHour that she sent to a friend 4 days before she died, she wrote, "I told my non-commissioned officer, and he didn't take it that serious." She writes she then told a female sergeant who admitted she didn't speak up, and a similar situation happened to her when she first got here too. Graham told others who were more senior, but all they cared about was the Army doctrine and cover up themselves. I really was asking for help and therapy. I just feel mistreated. Graham moved in with her brother off base to get away from her alleged attacker. The siblings had always been close. Anthony saw his sister's descent. She started drinking and taking pills and became self-destructive. She got a DUI. She died of an overdose. But in counseling, Anthony says she was told not to tell anyone anything.
They heard her story, and then right afterwards, they're like, all right, we just need you to shut up about this. Don't talk about it to nobody. Don't tell nobody about it. We're going to take care of it.
Last month, Fort Bliss charged Private First Class Christian Alvarado with raping Asia Graham in December 2019. And 5 months later, raping another woman. And 3 months after that, sexually assaulting a third woman. Per Army regulations, he's still on base, on active duty, and free.
Is what happened to Asia Grant typical?
Yes. Who's responsible for the soldiers' well-being? It's the chain of command. They didn't listen, and in this case, the survivor is dead.
Camilla Vance Shadley and her husband, retired Major General Robert Shadley, are with Never Alone Advocacy, a nonprofit that helps military victims of sexual assault. Over the past decade, the number of reported victims has doubled, from 3,327 in 2010 to 7,825 in 2019. But the actual number of sexual assaults, including those not reported, is estimated to be 20,000. Last year, an independent investigation found a permissive environment for sexual assault at Fort Hood and a lack of knowledge among commanders on when and how to report sexual assaults. At Fort Bliss, Graham faced the same challenges.
They actually are allowing the commands to make choices as to what rules they will follow, they won't, and Asia's the perfect one. 4 people knew that she had complained.
It is not the chain of command's choice to whether to believe or not. Their responsibility is to report it to trained investigators to look into it to get the ground truth.
But Shadley says the buck doesn't stop with Graham's unit.
Commander at Fort Bliss should be held accountable in order to send a signal to the command and to all the other division commanders, you better get involved.
Shadley knows this problem.
We as leaders have a responsibility to take care of our soldiers, and it breaks your heart when we don't.
In 1996, he commanded the Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, when it became known that drill sergeants had been preying on young female trainees.
I have been told by hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers that they don't trust their chain of command. This is a force readiness issue. I predict a young leader is going to stand up on the battlefield and say, follow me, and the soldiers are going to say, I don't think so.
In a statement to PBS NewsHour, Fort Bliss says it's investigating when Graham originally reported to her commanders and, quote, if indeed those leaders took no actions, then failure to act would be unacceptable. But other service members say their leaders also take no action.
I've dedicated my life to the military.
In a viral TikTok video, a Marine says her commanding general allowed her perpetrator to stay in the service.
And this is exactly why females in the military kill themselves. This is exactly why nobody takes us seriously.
Today, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin admitted the military has not effectively dealt with sexual assault.
We've been working at this for a long time, in earnest, but we haven't gotten it right. I found the video deeply disturbing. I'm going to ask that her chain of command make sure that someone is looking out after her needs.
Last year, candidate Biden promised to tackle sexual assault in the military. At a fundraiser, he said commanders should be removed from sexual assault reporting and prosecution decisions.
We have to change the culture of abuse in this country, especially in armed services. I'd immediately appoint a commission of current and former military leaders, sexual assault survivors, and their advocates and sexual assault experts, and give them 90 days to make concrete recommendations to me, including on prosecution decisions.
But Shadley warns the military may not follow through, and so he urges President Biden to demand results.
I believe the president should stick to his word and say, I want you to fix it. If the current leadership isn't going to do it, get somebody in there who will.
Back in Nicole Graham's home, what was once pride and hope in Asia's uniform is now regret that she ever allowed her daughter to put it on.
I really beat myself up that I signed the paperwork for her to go. When they recruit the kids, they say it's a family. What kind of family lets people get raped and not taking care of the rapist? I wish I never would have signed the paper.
They are victims of a plague that the military has known about for decades, but never cured. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
And now we turn to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, columnist for the Washington Post. So good.
Degrees below average. Now, we'll be making that up a little bit over the next several days because
He's also saying that while not every American will be vaccinated by July, we will have enough vaccine supply then for everyone. What does that announcement mean for all of us watching and listening?
And where you're hearing about it for the entire week.
Listen, Laura Wasser is a pro at this game. All right, now on to our Abby.
Well, they weren't even consulted. So Nancy Pelosi runs her own race. She now, is in complete control. She's running Chuck Schumer in the Senate. She seems to be running the government. Everything she wants, she gets. And there has to be questions, as Jim Jordan and others have asked, about her role. What did she know and when did she know it? Surely she was warned, certainly her office was warned that there was a threat coming up on January 6th. Why didn't she go out of her way to ensure that the Capitol Police were not left alone to face a mob of hundreds of thousands of people? They were completely outnumbered. What on earth were they meant to do? Many of them were injured. What were they meant to do? They could not possibly stop that mob from barging in.
Yeah, so many unanswered questions. So I want to switch gears here because the Democrats have introduced a bill. Now let me tell you, let me lay this out. A bill to make sure that anyone who's been impeached twice cannot be buried at Arlington Cemetery. What do you make of that? What do you think they're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. There's only one president who's been doubly impeached, and that's because, again, of the petty vindictiveness of Nancy Pelosi and her pals. And again, this is just childish, petty revenge. And you just wonder why they are so afraid of Donald Trump. The Democrats, they won the election. They control everything in Washington. What are they afraid of? Donald Trump has gone, but it just shows you that they have no confidence in their own ability to do anything, to manage the country, to run policy, to not alienate the bulk of the American people with their crazy, extreme, radical agenda. And they're sort of like Wile E. Coyote chasing the roadrunner. And, when they catch him, they don't know what to do because their entire identity is about chasing down Donald Trump and demonizing him. And now they are switching to demonizing the 75 million people who voted for him.
Absolutely right. Miranda, it's so great to have you on tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right. Ahead, a brand new abortion battle has Planned Parenthood suing tonight after South Carolina puts a new law in place banning abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected. So where is our Catholic President Joe Biden on this one? Tammy Bruce is here next.
A singular void.
Bring better sleep to homes everywhere. With the bed awarded.
Work together to create a bill that would raise the minimum wage and fix enforcement of immigration on the border. And they're trying to make the party a regular party, so it's not just a media party, but a party that actually does legislation. And I think that's a pretty promising way to try to displace Trumpism.
But meantime, Jonathan, you had former President Trump coming out this week, appearing on 3 different, conservative TV channels, still talking about how the election was stolen, attacking Mitch McConnell. Is McConnell hurt by this? I mean, I guess I'm asking how lasting is this this damage the former president still trying to level?
Look, in a battle between Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, I put my money on Mitch McConnell. Senator McConnell is, worried about two things. One of which he has succeeded. Judges was the first one, but the most important thing is power. He lost the Senate majority primarily because of what then President Trump did that allowed those two Georgia seats to flip to the two Democrats, Warnock and Ossoff. But also, Senator McConnell wants that majority back. And so that's why I think we saw him, on the one hand, vote for the acquittal of Donald Trump, but then after that vote, excoriate Donald Trump, lay the blame right at his feet. And in doing that, what I think Mitch McConnell is doing is creating an environment for his caucus and those Republicans running for the Senate in 2022 and 2024, giving them the room to be able to run races that would give them the best chance at winning. And when it comes to Donald Trump, it's all about him. It's not about the party. It's not about policy, as David was talking about. It's about him and loyalty to him. And so if you're Mitch McConnell and you are about power, but you're also about doing things that advance the Republican Party, you're going to do whatever it takes to push Trump to the side and make it possible for those candidates to come to the fore.
So David, who's got more muscle, Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump? And I do want to ask you both about Rush Limbaugh, but McConnell first.
Yeah, I questioned McConnell's strategy last Saturday, doing that acquittal vote, and then excoriating, as Jonathan said. Napoleon said, if you're going to take Vienna, take Vienna. But maybe Jonathan writes it sets the Republicans up for a good run in 2022. And let's face it, you'd have to think it's likely the Republicans will take the House and Senate. That's just the way what happens in midterm elections. The opposition party does very well. And I think McConnell's main goal is to keep really extreme Trumpians from getting Republican nominations in these Senate races and House races. And so maybe he's playing that game, just trying to ride this thing out and not try to fire everybody up and fire up the Trumpian base.
And David, in just a few words, the legacy of Rush Limbaugh.
Well, he changed media. He changed AM radio. Before, Rush Limbaugh hosts tend to be not too opinionated. After Rush Limbaugh, on left and right, hosts are super opinionated. He changed conservatism from George F. Will and William F. Buckley to what we have today. So he had a big positive effect on media, I think, and a pretty negative effect on American conservatism.
Jonathan, it was on the media, as David says. It was also on the Republican Party and on conservatism broadly.
Right. My relationship when it comes to Rush Limbaugh is more than complicated. As someone who was attacked by him many times when he was on the radio, I mourn for his I mourn for his family and the people who loved him. But I quite honestly do not, simply because of the corrosive nature of his radio programming and what he did with the power that he had, the corrosive nature that he had on American politics, on American political discourse. And if, legacies can be good and legacies can be bad. And I think for me, personally, Rush Limbaugh's legacy is one that has harmed the country.
All right. President Biden, first month in office after tomorrow. David, what are you seeing so far? And before you answer that, let me ask you both to respond to something President Biden said at the CNN town hall on Wednesday night, reminding us that he's not comfortable yet in this new job. Let's listen.
I was raised in a way that you didn't look for anybody to wait on you. And it's where I find myself extremely self-conscious. They're wonderful people, work at the White House. But someone, standing there and, making sure hands me my suit coat.
So, David, I guess I should have said not comfortable with the trappings of the office yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird being president. Every president talks about this. You're never alone. Secret Service knows when you go to the bathroom. They know when you're in the elevator. George W. Bush would ride his motorbike or his bike, his mountain bike, up at a training center, a Secret Service training center in Maryland, and he would try to ride in front of the agents because he said that was the only time of his week when there weren't people in front of him and he could look out and sort of be alone. And so it's just very weird being president. I think very hard. As for President Biden, I think he's doing a lot of sensible things on his own. What's different from the Obama start, and Obama had a bigger Senate majority, Obama passed some big legislation right away. Lilly Ledbetter week 1, children's health care week 2, the stimulus package week 3. So there was a lot of legislative action. There hasn't been as much from President Biden.
Jonathan, how do you see these first 30 days?
Well, I see them as terrific, if only because we have a president of the United States who's focused on governing, who's focused on doing things on behalf of the American people, but who is also not focused on being in our faces 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with all manner of vitriol and nastiness towards his political opponents or even regular citizens. Judy, what I love about that clip you showed of President Biden talking about his not being comfortable with the trappings of the presidency is that's the man the American people voted for. It's a person for whom service, public service, the emphasis is on the service, but it's also the public, someone other than himself. You know, he is that boy from Scranton whose family had hard times and he worked his way up to the highest office in the land. And the idea that, you know, with this office comes someone who hands him his suit coat in the morning, or to David's point, you know, he and his family now are never alone. That I think it resonates with the American people because this is someone for whom power is something that's part of the job. It wasn't anything that he strove for just for power's sake. For him, being president of the United States is about helping people.
And David, less than a minute, but your thoughts on whether he's getting people behind him? I mean, is it your sense that he's building the kind of public support he's going to need?
Yeah, I think he is actually. He's amazingly done very well at holding the Democratic Party together, which was not natural. I think he's done that extremely skillfully. His approval rating, there really have been not so many flaws, not so many errors. One little error about when schools are going to reopen, but pretty much else, it's a professional organization, just as it was a professional campaign.
All right, it's only been a month. We'll do this every month, every week. We'll keep asking. How's he doing? How's he doing? Very good to see both of you. Have a good weekend. David Brooks, Jonathan Capehart, thank you both.
Rarely hear the press say anything nice about Catholics unless they're liberal, pro-choice Catholics.
Well, yes, and look, let's be honest here, is that he may say he's a Catholic, but the real religion is liberalism. That is the thing that matters first and foremost. All of the rest of it, and you put it very well in your monologue, are really gestures. They're tokens, right? I mean, the rosary beads, saying it a lot. You can say you're a Catholic, not say you're devout. It is signaling to the American people that they're supposed to presume something about you because you say this. But that then, as a result, as you describe Catholicism and what matters to Catholics, then becomes a lie. It's interesting that they even don't feel comfortable, someone like Biden or whoever's running Biden certainly, feel that they need to essentially lie by omission or lie by implication to the American people because we are people of faith. Right. Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, etc. And it matters to us. They know that. They do a little flag waving. And then, of course, as you've noted, he signals and then acts on policy that is the complete opposite of what people would have expected.
Right, you know, it's interesting because this week AOC, you know, it's Lent, right? And so there is a member of Congress whose son tragically passed away, who's Jewish, by the way. And she said, in honor of this man's son, who happens to be a vegan, she's been wanting to be a vegetarian herself. for so long that she was going to become a vegetarian over Lent, and she went to her social media account and, asked everybody else to become a vegetarian with her over Lent, whether they were, Christian or not. Again, it just seems like so interesting to me as a Catholic. I mean, these very ancient, meaningful traditions that we have, and it just seems like she's appropriating it for her own uses. It doesn't seem like there's really anything Catholic about it, and if you wanted to be a good Catholic, you might, over Lent, you might start with, supporting, the pro-life policies of the church or the pro-life ideas of the church.
Yeah. Well, it's virtue signaling, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's pandering as well. And this is the underlying dynamic here is it's insulting.
Yeah.
It's insulting.
Exactly.
There's this sense that Catholics, are, they really don't know what they're doing. This is dumb. We can, throw a few things at them. It'll satisfy them. This is all talk. In the world of the left, it is all talk. And here's the problem. In our lives, this is about our families. It's about our children. It's about what the future is going to be. The loves in your life. What matters and what makes all of this run, which is life. And here they are using it like a game piece, like something that will maneuver people around so that they can get what they want. There's an ugliness, there's a cynicism to it, because you and your family, Amy Coney Barrett's family, the people around me that I love, the children that I know, the drive for in humanity to have a family and to have a future that's based in watching that family grow. When you watch American politicians, it's an insult and an obscene smear of that kind of commitment to this country and to what you stand for and to what you hope for your children.
Yeah, it's so true. The left, Tammy, loves to use the word lived experience. Well, for us Catholics who are faithful, it is our lived experience. And you're right, it is a very deep insult what she did on social media. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Tammy. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Coming up, here's a new one. A Democratic congresswoman now arguing we cannot send children back into the classroom yet because, get this, after so much time of remote learning, she says, they're just not yet socially or emotionally ready to return. What? We're going to tackle this one next.
Over-the-counter eye drops typically work by lubricating your
IV through sex. Serious side effects can occur.
There is a chance, especially Saturday night and into Sunday morning, especially for the Sioux Falls and eastern areas of the
night fun and games.
We swing, which means we're forced to share that freedom. And we come from a blues aesthetic and blues idiom, which means that we can look into the face of something that is tragic and not paint the fake smile on it and still be optimistic about the use of our will to come together and make things better for the future.
Marcellus wrote the suite amid the pandemic and recorded it with members of the orchestra at Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York, where he's managing an artistic director. Its first movement is titled Be Present, something he, like all of us, is having trouble with, performing on a stage he's used to, but with no audience.
At first it was really strange. Just to put together concerts where we all record at home and we compile everything. That also was very unusual at first, but now we're acclimated to it.
Now you're acclimated to looking out from the stage and not seeing anybody there.
You don't want to get too used to that.
Marcellus famously grew up in the vibrant world of New Orleans jazz, surrounded by its traditions and ever-alive sounds. Now even Mardi Gras parades have been canceled. And the pandemic brought personal loss. The death from COVID of his 85-year-old father, Ellis. Himself a pianist, educator, and patriarch of the musical family that includes saxophonist Branford.
My father, when he was alive, his observation at that point was that if it happens to you, it's no more significant than anybody else. Many people are losing their loved ones. You be a part of a collective grief, and it's also a part of the cycle of life. He accepted it like that. He was very large-spirited all the way to the end, the way he lived. So I don't take away any bad feelings or anything left unsaid. And even though I was not able to be with him, that still hurts. But, We all have, it's a tough time for everybody.
Marcellus has long found ways to address the current moment and the past that informs it. His jazz oratorio, Blood on the Field, set amid slavery, won the 1997 Pulitzer Prize, the first for a jazz composition. His new work includes a section titled Sloganize, Patronize, Realize, Revolutionize.
The melody of that song is the chant, Black Lives Matter. We have some sections where the horns improvise together, like the trumpet and the trombone play a solo and share space. If you take the way we share the space, the way that we repeat what it is that we're playing, and the conclusions we come to, in the language of instrumental music, it's evocative of a feeling, of a deliberateness, and ultimately of an optimism. I want as much as possible to try to communicate to you all the holistic nature of this experience.
Marcellus continues to teach in top music schools and run his annual Essentially Ellington program for high school students around the country. We joined him for that in 2011.
1, 2, 3.
Last year, in the time of pandemic, it was held remotely. And in a time of killings of more black men and women and protests in the streets, young students had questions that went well beyond the music.
In today's America, we have reached a renewed period of civil unrest. Do we as musicians, specifically jazz musicians, hold roles and responsibilities in regards to these movements today?
In answer, Marcellus points to the work of young musicians like John Baptiste, who performed in the streets during last summer's protests. One of the New Suite's movements is dedicated to him.
I love to see them active because in my class, at the beginning of every year, I always ask students, what does the United States Constitution do? What is it designed to do? I'm always looking for them to say it's a document that's designed to level the playing field for everyone through a sophisticated system of checks and balances. 1, 2, 3. It's important for us as artists to be engaged with our way of life as jazz musicians because that's the tradition of our music.
That's the question you ask in class, right? That's not a musical question, or is it?
Well, you know, it's a musical question because when they don't answer it, I always say, if we don't know what our Constitution does, what chance do we have of figuring out what jazz is?
The Democracy Suite is available on streaming sites and the Jazz at Lincoln Center website. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown.
Wonderful conversation, the one and only Wynton Marsalis. And on the PBS NewsHour online, how do you capture the enormous human loss to COVID-19? One artist says the key is to remember the individual. Read more about the installation she built in Washington, D.C. and how she's helping it live on virtually. That's pbs.org/newshour. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here on Monday evening. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, we hope you have a good, safe weekend. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
had power outages for less than 5 minutes, and according to El Paso Electric, they had power on for almost every household within a matter of a few hours.
Yeah, amazing the difference. Diane, thank you for that reporting. Out front next, incredible new images tonight from NASA's Perseverance on Mars. This gets me very excited. You'll see them next.
Plus says this is the first time the 4th and 5th seasons will be released on home entertainment. Fans of Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, and Fozzie Bear can also watch The Muppet Movie and The Muppet Christmas Carol on Disney+. When we come back, Austin will have a last look at your forecast.
the First Alert Weather Team, only on Dakota News Now.
educational learning, and they have to answer for that. This is going to be the biggest mess up in our nation's history, and our kids are the ones that are suffering. Go back to normal. I'm waiting for Joe Biden to tell these teachers unions it's time to get back to work. Our students are too important. You're so right, Tommy. I mean, Alicia, these children have lost a year of school, and as I said, many of them are unnecessarily frightened. But a lot of the high schoolers, they know nothing's going to happen to them. They just want to go back to school.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've seen an increase in attempted suicides and depression, along with ADD, ADHD, the need for glasses because of all of their screen time, and carpal tunnel in kids in elementary school. My girls have been out of school since March 13th of last year. In the fall, I decided, like many Americans, forget the distance learning. I don't need them on a screen for 5 hours a day. What good is that going to do for my first grader? And decided to homeschool. You've seen an increase in homeschooling, and you've seen states like California, I think, shocked by the demand of all the people registering, because I have to apologize for the Congresswoman, even though she isn't from my district in California. Politicians have repeatedly failed us, and I'd like to think that President Biden is going to do something about it, like Tommy wishes he would, but let's be honest, the Democrats get way too much money from teachers unions to do anything to upset them.
Yeah, you're so right. And also, you know, obesity is on the rise with children. I mean, they've cut out sports. You know, the parks are closed. You know, even at universities, many of the gyms are closed, or they tell the kids you have to sign up and only go for 30 minutes. I mean, a lot of these rules just make no sense when we know that being healthy is a great preventative to COVID. Tommy, I don't have a lot of time, but what do you say to that? I would say I would believe that these students these teachers want to follow the science, because after all, they are teachers. And to these teachers who are still complaining about health and safety, imagine if our first responders, our ranchers, our farmers, or any of our other essential workers decided it was too dangerous for them to go back to work. Imagine the shape our country would be in. The problem is we've given these teachers and these teachers unions the luxury of saying no. That has to stop. Get back to normal. Reopen America. Enough is enough. The science tells us it's time to get back to normal. Yeah, Alicia, how much more can parents take? I mean, I don't have a lot of time, but I just got to get to you. I just think we're reaching the boiling point.
Yep. I think what's interesting is you've seen two key groups, females and minority groups, that are the most negatively affected by school shutdowns, and Democrats have to decide, are they going to choose teachers unions or that other base that they've come to rely on in elections for so very long?
Victoria, can you just rescue this, please? Who won the week? Okay.
We're going with Texans, everyday Texan neighbors who are checking on each other, who are pulling each other out of ditches when they were on the roads, and a very special shout out to my parents' neighbors who were taking care of them when I couldn't get to them because of the storm. So it's about the Texan neighbors this week.
Yeah, that's wonderful. See, that's good. See, Michael, that's how you do it positive, because yours was super ironic. It was funny, it was comedy, but I don't know if it was really the winner. Okay, we're going to give Lee Dance, who's our special, wonderful, esteemed guest. Sir, who, in your view, won the week?
I'm mad at him because Ted Cruz rocks my world for that one. That was a good one. I was saying the 911 workers from Texas. I mean, all around the country, all around the state, what they've been doing is an incredible job. Half of them don't have electricity. They're in the same, they're home, it's a mess out there for them, and yet they're able to direct the people that are calling in. They are my heroes right now.
Absolutely. Well, my pick is not a person. My pick is a little adorable thing. Snowflake. Snowflake won the week, and I'm going to tell you why. Snowflake, who was left at home with some human who also was ditched by Ted Cruz and didn't get to go to Mexico, got to spend a full 24 hours not in the presence of Ted Cruz. That's called Snowflake winning the week. I'm the host, therefore I win. Lee Daniels, Michael Steele, Victoria DeFrancesco Soto. That is great. Lee's new movie, The United States versus Billie Holiday, premieres next Friday on Hulu. You must watch it. That's tonight's readout.
Pass on your values. You tell your kids about them. So school matters, maybe more than anything. And from the very first day of this show, we have covered the way our schools are changing and the indoctrination that your kids are suffering through. Here was our first segment on it.
I taught my class shortly after Hillary Clinton gave her concession speech. And for many students, particularly for young women, It was something a glass ceiling to break, to aspire to have a woman as president of the United States. And so I don't think it's about, as you were saying, being hysterical, but it's about processing and having a space to make sense of what happened and to have a discussion.
I get it, but it's also about having safe spaces. And at the University of Michigan Law School, where adults have presumably attend, and I'm quoting now, post-election self-care and food and play. So this included Play-Doh and Legos, a safe space for people to go to, feel, I don't know what. And that is kind of the question to you. What is a safe space exactly?
Well, in my opinion, the role of higher education is to foster debate, but also to be cognizant of students that are coming to our campuses from many different backgrounds.
But the role of the university, in practical terms, is not to foster debate, it's to squelch it. And so people who disagree are crushed, and people who agree with the herd are elevated. I mean, is there really a debate? Do you know a single DePaul University professor who voted for Trump and said so out loud? Do you know one?
You know what? I do not talk about my personal political leanings with my colleagues.
You know as well as I that there isn't any at all. The whole idea of diversity is that the airless room produces bad decisions. We need people from different walks of life who have different points of view in order to make wise decisions. I think that's the underlying justification for it. And yet, in academia, there's virtually no one who disagrees from the liberal orthodoxy. Boy, that was only 4 years ago, and already it seems antique. People who disagree with each other talking through their disagreement, that doesn't happen anymore. And of course, the curricula at so many schools has taken a much harder edge since that time, from the extreme left wing to the outright totalitarian.
I didn't feel good about it even as we were heading out. I knew why we said yes, but I was thinking it was a mistake almost from the outset.
By the way, the look down and make it look like you're actually thinking about what you're about to say, even though you've actually prepared it all in advance, it's a classic Cruz move. Keep it honest, there's a lot, as they say, to unpack in what the senator said, almost enough to fill the large suitcase he brought for a trip he initially suggested was just to drop off the kids and head back straight to home. That, of course, wasn't true, nor was it true when he initially claimed it was his daughters wanting to go on a trip with friends that was motivating all of this. As for his claim that he started having second thoughts as soon as he sat down on the plane, that may be true because likely he started looking at his phone and likely saw that he was quickly on his way to becoming a trending hashtag, photos and all. He is certainly a very smart man and knows that pictures like these don't look good. But if the feelings of remorse were so intense so soon, probably could have just gotten off the plane. His wife was still on the plane. She could have gone and escorted the kids. It was still at the gate. As for damage control, well, he's definitely shifted that into cruise control.
We're at a very divided place in our country where people are screaming vitriol and hate. And you know what? I think that is a sad sign of where we are. I don't do that to other people. You don't see me screaming at people I disagree with that they need to resign. And one of the things I'm most dismayed about how the last 24 hours has played out is this whole thing has dominated the airwaves instead of focusing on let's solve the problems. Listen, Texans want the power back on, they want the water back on, they want the problem solved.
I'm sure he is dismayed at the coverage, but not for the stated reason. Because truth be told, it has not dominated the airwaves. It may feel that way to him because it is so mortifying, but the airwaves have actually been dominated on local and national news outlets, including ours, with hours and hours of reporting on the actual crisis. The one you were tired of hearing about and dealing with, and we're trying to escape from, Senator Cruz. As for the country being, as you say, in a divided place, coming from the guy who did all he could to perpetuate the lie that the election was stolen, the guy who voted to challenge the outcome of the legitimate election even after the Capitol was attacked, it's a little rich. Let's go to Texas now for the latest. CNN's Ed Lavandera is in Dallas for us. Ed, what is the situation?
Hey Anderson, well here tonight we know that the death toll across the state of Texas after what has been an absolutely miserable week is at 26. Most of those victims died of hypothermia and exposure to carbon monoxide poisoning, and it highlights that even with another night of frigid temperatures coming, that the worst isn't over yet. A military plane transporting 84,000 bottles of water from California landed in Galveston, Texas. Thousands of people are driving through massive food and water distribution sites in Houston and San Antonio.
I don't think any of us was expecting this, for it to be like this. So it's all about survival right now until it starts getting warm. No water,
It's real bad, and I have a 7-year-old, and it's tough.
Some 14 million Texans are battling water shortages as more than 1,200 public water systems across the state are fighting to fix disruptions caused by the winter storm and power grid failure. The worst of the Texas freeze is over. State officials say the power grid emergency is now under control.
We want to make sure that whatever happened in ERCOT falling short never happens again.
Governor Greg Abbott is now calling on state lawmakers to pay for power plant weatherization upgrades.
To ensure that all of the machinery that froze up and was unable to generate the power you need, that may require funding. The state of Texas should step up and provide that funding.
There are still tens of thousands of people without power in Texas, but getting those people back online will require utility crews to repair damage inflicted by the historic winter storm, and that could take several more days to repair.
I really want to acknowledge just the immense human suffering that we saw throughout this event. When people lose power, there are heartbreaking consequences.
7 people around the town of Abilene died from weather-related causes. A volunteer found an elderly couple in their home. It was 12 degrees inside.
They had been reluctant to leave their home, and so it was 24 hours later, she went back to take them food and found the husband deceased in bed.
As if battling a massive power outage and frigid temperatures wasn't enough, residents like Melissa Webb in the San Antonio area apartment complex could only watch as fire destroyed their homes.
I haven't been able to go to work all week long. Now everything that we have in there is gone.
As the water pressure was, as you mentioned, that
Part of the building collapsed as a reporter interviewed a firefighter. Frozen fire hydrants and failing water supply hampered efforts by firefighters to put out the flames. Cities are battling crisis after crisis. Del Rio Mayor Bruno Lozano says his city's wastewater system was knocked offline for an hour this week, which sent sewage seeping into some low-lying parts of the city.
This is something that it's beyond historical, beyond unprecedented. It's a chain reaction of worst-case scenario of worst-case scenarios.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has renewed calls for an investigation of ERCOT, the agency that runs the state's power grid system, and has also called for its executives to resign. Bill Magnus, the CEO of ERCOT, answered those questions on CNN.
How can you keep your job after a week like this?
We're accountable to the people and the leadership of Texas. We're going to go and explain the steps we took and how that played into the entire situation on the electric grid. If that's the outcome, that's the outcome.
In Anderson tonight, there are still about just under 130,000 households without power. The peak earlier this week was about 4.5 million. So it has changed dramatically, but that water issue is going to extend well into the weekend as things slowly get back to normal here, Anderson.
And then, people are obviously calling for changes in the wake of this. How likely is that things are going to change? Because, Aaron Burnett's just aired a piece about El Paso, which had experiences in the past with cold weather, and they winterized their facilities, and they were able to really keep most of the power on during this time.
Well, the governor has made it clear that he wants the winterization issue of the power plants to become an emergency item for state lawmakers who just happen to be in session. Here, state lawmakers meet once every 2 years, but Anderson, there is a long history that goes back decades of these state lawmakers here in Texas not being very willing to put forth these kinds of regulations and ideas to improve these types of systems. So there's always been a lot of pushback here in this state. This is a state that loves cheap energy, as cheap as possible, and they see regulations as an impediment to that. So you had that struggle here. So we'll see where it goes. It's going to be a long, hard fight.
I love it, Derek. Appreciate it. Now joining us is former communications director for Senator.
Literally just been denying what's happening. I mean, Ted Cruz was telling me that satellite data showed that global warming, climate change wasn't happening like 2 years ago when I interviewed him on stage in Texas. But you've also got a political problem, which is that insuring against big risks, like something like, okay, we're going to spend a bunch of money to weatherize these systems or make them resilient, that could be a tough sell, right? That's not an immediate, tangible thing, but then when the disaster strikes, you're sure glad you did it.
Right. I mean, this is the paradox. It seems that as a nation, we're prepared to spend billions of your taxpayer dollars after disaster for things that we could have reduced the impacts and build more resiliency on the front end. And I think the way we get both parties to agree to this is let's talk about the dollars this is costing us, and that we shouldn't be building things to get damaged and have to be repaired again with taxpayers' monies. Let's fix it right the first time. We'll clean up after these disasters, but we should be building for future risk so that taxpayers' dollars, they're not being wasted repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
And it's so true, and you see that, and it makes sense, right? The politics around disaster relief tend to be quite bipartisan, with some rare exceptions. Like I remember there was a Texas senator who opposed to the Sandy supplemental named Ted Cruz, but that was a rare exception. Most folks come together and they say these people need help, fellow Americans. But if you try to do this stuff out front, right? If you say, well, this year in this budget, we want to bump up how much we're spending on pandemic prevention, or we want to bump up what we're going to be doing on flooding, that's a much tougher sell.
Not now. I think we have an opportunity to get our economy going, to make some big investments in our infrastructure, putting people back to work, grow America's economy, and build infrastructure for the future. This is the opportunity we need to come out of this pandemic and put people to work that haven't had jobs, get our economy going, and it's going to take some taxpayer dollars. But let's spend money now and build our infrastructure for what we're facing, and put people to work and start buying down the risk from these disasters and make our communities more resilient. So when we do have these extreme events, it's manageable and not as devastating and as deadly as these are for our public.
That's really well said, Craig Fugate. Thanks for sharing your real considerable expertise with us tonight. I really.
Trump administration allowed the poison of identity politics to go into its STEM funding. The Biden administration, it's going to be hellacious. One's imagination cannot possibly fathom how much single colorblind standards of merit and achievement are going to be shredded under the Biden administration. We have to speak back at this.
I hope none of their kids get into Princeton anymore. I mean that. I hope they all go to community college.
It's just bad.
Because you're right. This is the ruling class protecting itself. There's no doubt. Heather McDonald, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Now, the principal, the head of one public school, is now calling for parents to, quote, abolish people with the wrong DNA. This is insanity. And the country had better say so, or dark days ahead. We'll tell you where it's being said.
This program is sponsored by Hillsdale College, pursuing truth and defending liberty since 1844.